This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Disabled Persons Assembly's Notable Radio Show. DPA is a systemic advocacy organisation run by and for disabled people. DPA is a pan-impaired organisation with members across the country. Over the next half hour, we'll discover how we can work collaboratively to achieve inclusion for all New Zealanders. DPA's Notable Radio Show, a whole new attitude.
Kia ora and welcome to DPA's Notable Radio. I'm your host, Amy Taylor. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, AI, and what that means for disabled people. AI is increasingly becoming a feature of our everyday lives. It writes emails, captions videos, answers questions, and generates images. It predicts behavior, filters jobs applications. It even helps determine eligibility for services, which is really relevant for the disabled community. But does AI open doors for disabled people, or does it shut us out? So what do we mean by AI? We all know that AI stands for artificial intelligence, but what does that actually mean? We're talking about computer systems that can process data, recognize patterns, make predictions, or generate content based on those predictions. Often AI-generated content is scarily accurate, but sometimes it badly misses the mark. Can you think of some examples? We always say, look for the hands. When you're doing AI-generated images, look for the hands. AI is really bad at hands. For some examples of AI application are speech-to-text tools, predictive text and writing support, image recognition, automated decision-making systems, and chatbots and virtual assistants. So if you think of these things that I've just mentioned from a disability standpoint, some of them could potentially be really useful. Things like speech-to-text tools could be really useful for the deaf community. Predictive text and writing support can be great if you don't have full use of your hands. Image recognition for the blind community. And chatbots and virtual assistants for those that aren't able to do certain things by themselves. But it's really important to remember that from a disability standpoint, AI is not neutral. It learns from data, and that data reflects the biases that already exist in our society. And we know that our society has distinct biases against the disabled community. So, for example, if most of the pictures of doctors online are white, able-bodied males, if you ask AI to generate a picture of a doctor, you'll probably get a white, able-bodied male. And that's particularly relevant in the disabled community, where disabled people are often not represented in the best light. We're often represented as needing pity or pitiful or sad, or a lot of these things that are a sort of historical hangovers from a time when disabled people were really treated much worse than they are now. But AI can also be positive. For many disabled people, AI-powered tools are profoundly enabling. Here are some examples. We've already mentioned speech-to-text technology. Speech-to-text technology allows people with mobility impairments or chronic pain to dictate instead of type. It also allows deaf people to pick up speech and read it as text. Real-time captioning supports the deaf and hard of hearing community. This can be really useful in meetings or in classroom settings. Image descriptions are really helpful for the blind to navigate digital content, and you will see image descriptions on photos are not yet particularly good, to be honest. So if you are actually relying on automatically generated alt text, please don't. Actually go back and check the alt text of your photos and see whether the bot has managed to pick up something that is actually an accurate representation of your photo. They're getting better, but it's really important that we still manually insert image descriptions for the blind community. Predictive text and language tools can be very supportive for people with dyslexia, brain injury, or fatigue. Also, anybody with lack of mobility in their hands. So language tools, they're actually really useful for anybody. A lot of these things can be useful for the disabled community, but they also have a much wider use. For example, neurodivergent people, AI chat tools can help draft difficult emails or structure complex ideas. Again, very useful for the general community, but particularly useful for those that are neurodivergent. All these tools are important for access, and they can increase independence, and also they have a role in levelling the playing field for employment. So they overcome some of the barriers that disabled people face to employment. So AI can also be used for disability tools, so more direct uses for the disabled community. And so it has some amazing applications in assistive technology, which can help disabled people live full lives. These include smart prosthetics that can adapt to movement, eye tracking and communication devices, environmental control systems, navigational apps, and smart glasses that can describe the surroundings. Actually, interestingly enough, tomorrow I've got an audiology appointment to be fitted with AI hearing aids, which apparently they use a neural network which has been trained to recognize speech in noisy environments. So I'm really interested to see how this actually plays out. But it's actually showing that there is a real-life applications for some of these AI tools in assistive technology. However, we do need to be aware of systemic bias. The internet is a place of data, but it is not a place of neutral data. That data contains significant bias, and often there is significant bias in the data we're training our AIs in, and our society already has systemic bias towards the disabled community. So AI systems are trained on existing data. And unfortunately, disabled people are underrepresented in our existing data, and they're often misrepresented. So if you think back to our example of our white able-bodied male doctor, you're not going to, if you ask an AI to generate a picture of a doctor, you're unlikely to get a Hispanic female who uses a wheelchair. That's because of the bias that exists in our data. And the bias can be really dangerous as it perpetuates stereotypes. So it might perpetuate the idea that disabled people deserve our pity and are not capable. And that can lead to exclusion of disabled people. So here are some examples. For instance, facial recognition software. Facial recognition software is very bad if you have a facial difference. It doesn't pick up that person. And so that would lead to that technology not being available to that particular group. Voice recognition systems fail to understand speech patterns of people with disabilities. These disabilities include things like cerebral palsy, which can change speech patterns, and the voice recognition system just can't pick up that speech pattern. Automated hiring systems. Now, this is a huge problem because automated hiring systems often screen people out based on things that disabled people cannot actually control. Things like people who are neurodiverse might have certain tics, or they might not be presented in a way that the AI is trained to pick up on. So we expect people going to a job interview to be neatly dressed, to be polite and say certain words and phrases. But if you're neurodivergent, you might not pick up on these social cues that we're training our AIs to screen for. And that may mean that you're excluded off the bat without actually being given a fair opportunity. They might look for decisive movements and traditional elements of good interview technique. And those good interview techniques are not necessarily something that members of the disabled community are able to put forward. And that can exclude them before they've even got a foot in the door. So the other thing with this automated hiring systems is that they may be trained to exclude people who appear anxious, who are trembling or stutter. And those signals of anxiety may be actually many other things in the disabled community, things like essential tremor. There may also be anxiety, and being anxious at a job interview is not actually a particularly good reason to exclude somebody out of a job. As we've said, AI systems rely on data, but they also process data much faster than ever before. There are real concerns that AI systems might lead to discrimination against disabled people, with the likes of insurance companies being able to crunch through more data and draw more conclusions about risk. This can potentially lead to discrimination and lack of access to care for disabled people. So what is the bottom line here? How can we avoid these internal biases while still getting the good out of AI? Well, one of the key factors is co-design. So designing with disabled people at the table. So making sure that they are included every step of the way. Because as disabled people, we are more able to recognize the internal biases that are actually the pitfalls of AI-driven technology. And we can point those out, and that technology can be designed in such a way that those things are not leading to discrimination against disabled people. So if we make sure that disabled people are actually part of the design process, from step one, we can try and eliminate some of these biases and actually drive the technology in a direction that's actually going to be beneficial, positive to disabled people. We can see the real positive things that might come out of it. We've mentioned things like smart prosthetics and eye tracking communication devices and smart glasses. And so we know that there is technology and adaptation and far more potential that we haven't actually harnessed yet, but we need to have co-design with disabled people for this to actually work and not actually work against us. So this is a really rapidly evolving landscape, and it's almost impossible to know what tomorrow will bring in terms of innovation. And keeping track of the rate that AIs are actually developing. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about, even in Invercargill, building a massive server network to have some capacity for this. But the key message is that AI is not all good for the disabled community, but it's not all bad either. There's so much potential here in this technology, and that we need to be in the driving seat to actually make sure that the technology is used in a way that it is most beneficial for the disabled community. We are, as disabled people, already benefiting from this great technology in terms of assistive tech, but also things that can be used by all sorts of different people. We've mentioned speech-to-text technology and real-time captioning. These things are not exclusively used by the disabled community. They are used by the community as a whole. And the more we have technology that's freely available, that is used by the community as a whole, the less we are discriminating against disabled people by making the technology that's useful to them exclusive and expensive. So if our technology is things that is used by everybody, the price comes down and everybody can use it, including members of the disabled community. And this has a huge equalizing effect. However, we've spoken about the internal bias that can be present in AI-driven tools. And one of the real factors in this bias is that AI is trained by existing data. And a lot of our data contains intrinsic bias against disabled people, and forming disabled people as somehow lesser or deserving of pity or inferior. And if we train our AIs using this data, that's going to be a huge disadvantage to the disabled community. So the real key is that we need to be at the table and advocating for our best interest. There are huge benefits to the disabled community, but there are also huge risks and pitfalls. We need to advocate for our best interest in this time of huge technological change. We need to be training up young disabled people to be joining the AI revolution and to be sitting at the table and actually making sure that the needs of disabled people are catered for. So I hope that this has been interesting for everybody today. It's been really interesting to me to learn about how the AI is actually shaping assistive technology. Things like AI-driven wheelchairs are really helpful for the people with really advanced things like ALS that really limit people's ability to actually control the power chair. If you could use a mapping of the landscape and those people could actually, it's essentially like a self-driving car. It really increases people's potential independence. And there's so much exciting technology out there. So it's really interesting for me to learn about it. I'm looking forward to seeing how AI powered hearing aids change my life. I don't know. Let's see whether this is revolutionary or not. But yeah, it's such an evolving field. So thank you for listening today. This has been DPA's Notable Radio, and I'm your host, Amy Taylor.
Disabled Persons Assembly is Aotearoa, New Zealand's first pan-disability national organisation, providing system-level advocacy for all disabled people. Membership is free for individuals. If you'd like to know more, visit our national website at www.dpa.org.nz or contact your local kaituitui or community connector, Amy Taylor, at kaituitui.otipoti@dpa.org.nz. Disabled Persons Assembly, a whole new attitude.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.